Good morning. This is April 1st, and this video is for Math Fundamentals. So good morning, Isaac and Keisha. This is your video for math today. We're going to be on 12.3. Math Fundamentals 12.3. And let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of absolute value. And absolute value is pretty easy to understand, because absolute value just wants to know how far away from zero the number is. So if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Okay, so let's look at the number line. Absolute value is in these straight parallel lines that look like this. So the question might be, well, what is the absolute value of 3? Well, it wants to know how far away from 0 is 3. How many units? Well, it's 1, 2, 3 units away. So the absolute value of 3 is 3. Okay, here is the absolute value of -3. So it's not saying, well, what does this mean? It's saying, well, how many units from 0 is the -3? So let's look and let's count units from 0 to -3. 1, 2, 3. Well, how many units did I jump? I jumped 3 units. So the absolute value of -3 is also 3. Okay, so I hope you're catching on to this concept. If I was to ask you what is the absolute value of -5, you would say, well, how far away from 0 is it? It's 5 units away from 0. So the absolute value of -5 is 5. Okay, so what is the absolute value of 4? It's 4. Okay, so here's a little tip. The absolute value, the answer to absolute value is always a positive number. Okay? All right, so let's keep moving on. Let's turn to page 346, and we are going to be adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers. So far, you've added 2 positive numbers, and you've added 2 negative numbers. Okay, but what happens when we put a negative number and we add it to a positive number? Okay, and we're going to be taking a look at that today. So if you will look at the top of page 346, they give us the problem -9 plus 3. Okay, so it says step 1, find the difference of the 2 absolute values, which is 6. I'm gonna give it to you a little bit more simply than this. Okay, if the signs are opposite, then you're going to subtract. So let's just say opposite signs. I'm going to include this little positive here. Opposite signs, you're going to subtract. Okay? And then your answer will be the sign of the biggest number. Okay, so that's a little tricky, but let's walk through it. Okay, so here I want you to look at this addition sign of -9 plus 3. I want you to look. We have 2. What we're going to do as we start moving into pre-algebra is we look at every number as a negative or a positive. And so instead of seeing this as an addition sign, we're going to see it as a +3. So what I'm going to see is that I'm combining a -9 with a +3. And I'm going to put that -9 together with a +3. Okay? So they have opposite signs. One's a negative, one's a positive. So we're going to subtract the numbers, okay? So let's take the bigger number and subtract the smaller number. 9 minus 3 is 6, okay? So my answer is going to have a 6, but then we have to decide which sign it's going to have, okay? The sign that it's going to have is the answer will have the sign of the biggest number. Which is the bigger number, the absolute value? We're not doing negative 9 compared to 3 because we know that 3 is bigger. But we're looking at the absolute value, or 9 compared to 3. Which one's bigger? 9 is bigger if we look at their absolute values without their signs. So my answer is going to take the sign of the bigger number, and it's going to be negative 6. Okay? Let me do this on the number line for you. This might help clarify. I'm going to start with a negative 9 because that's the number that they asked me to start with. And then I'm going to move in a positive direction 3 units. 1, 2, 3. Because remember, if I'm going this way, I'm going positive. If I'm going this way, I'm going negative. So now let me fill in my number line. Negative 9, negative 8, negative 7, negative 6. Okay? Same answer. Okay? If it helps you to use a number line, please do that. Okay? But remember, if we have opposite signs, we subtract the numbers and then take the sign of the bigger number. Okay? So, let's do this. Let's do another one. It says find 5 plus negative 2. Okay? So the way that we want to look at this problem is we want to assign each number a sign. So this is a positive 5. So I'm going to combine a positive 5 with a negative 2. Okay? I'm going to combine a positive 5 with a negative 2. Okay? So when I do that, they have opposite signs, so I'm going to subtract. 5 minus 2 is 3. And then I'm going to take the sign of the larger number, and it's positive, right? Now, do I need to write a positive 3, or is it just 3? It's just 3. So 3 would be my answer. Let me show you on the number line here. I start with a positive 5. Okay? And I move negative 2 places. 1, 2. So I go 5, 4, 3. And it's still positive, right? So that's how I get the number on my answer line. Okay? Positive and negatives can be really tricky. This is moving into a very challenging where your mind has to kind of move fast and start wrapping your brain around what you're doing. Let's look at another one. It's example B says find negative 7 plus 7. In this case, we're combining a negative 7 and a positive 7. Okay? So they're opposite signs, so we're going to subtract. What's 7 minus 7? 0. We can take the sign of the bigger number, or we just see that 0 is neither negative nor positive. So my answer is just 0. Of course, you can envision this on the number line, can't you? I start at negative 7 and I move up 7. I'm going to land on 0 because these numbers are opposites from each other. Okay, let's do some of our skill check problems together. I'm going to write the problems. You can go ahead and start answering them, and then I'll come back and write the correct answers in to see how you're doing. So on skill check, number 1 is negative 9 plus 4. Number 2 is, you can go ahead and begin answering these. Okay, so let's go through and answer these problems. I'm combining a negative 9 with a positive 4. 9 minus 4 is 5. I take the sign of the bigger number. Here I'm combining a negative 5 and a negative 8. Now, I see all of a sudden I have two negative numbers. So remember, if they're both negative, then I add them together. 8 plus 5 is 13, and I keep the sign. So negative 13. Here I'm combining a positive 21 and a negative 8. My signs are opposite. So I'm going to say 21 minus 8. What is that? 7, so 13. Let me check that real quick. Yes. So the answer is 13. And we're going to keep the sign of the bigger number, so it's positive 13. Here we're combining a positive 22 and a negative 31. Now in this case the 31 is bigger, so I'm going to say 31 minus 22, and that's going to give me 9. Okay, and I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number, so that equals negative 9. Here I want to do order of operations, so I want to do what's inside my parentheses first. I'm combining a negative 1 and a negative 9. 9 plus 1 is 10, so I have a negative 10. Now I'm going to add my 6 plus 6. Here I have a negative combined with a positive, so I'm going to subtract. 10 minus 6 is 4, and it keeps the sign of the bigger number. Okay, here I'm going to work left to right because there's no parentheses. So I have a positive 8 combined with a negative 11. So 11 minus 8 is 3. Keep the sign of the bigger number. I'm going to bring down my positive 6. I'm going to combine these two. They're opposite signs, so I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 3 is 3, and I keep the sign of the bigger number. Okay, this one we're going to do the parentheses first. I have a negative and a positive. So it looks like there's 5. 22 minus 17 is 5. I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number. Then I can bring down my plus negative 5. And I'm going to combine my two negatives, so I add them and get 10 and keep the sign. Negative 10. Okay, rewatch this video, go back through, Marco Polo me if you have questions. Let's do 1 through 29 today.